The average American household earned more money in 2024 than at any point in the country's recorded economic history. Median household income crossed $78,000 for the first time ever. That's Census Bureau data. You can look it up. And the average net worth of someone aged 45 to 54 sits at around $975,000, according to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances. Sounds pretty good. Now strip out home equity, pension entitlements, and retirement accounts that can't be touched for another decade without a serious tax penalty, and you're left with a median liquid net worth closer to $78,000. For a 45-year-old who has been working full-time for roughly 20 years. So the statistical story of American wealth looks excellent. The actual, practical, what can you do with it right now wealth, that is a completely different document. Here's what nobody in personal finance says out loud, because it doesn't make for a great thumbnail. The gap isn't income. The gap is leakage. Quiet, invisible, systematic leakage that runs in the background of your daily life while you're focused entirely on the wrong layer of the problem. And the 10 habits I'm about to walk you through, habits so aggressively unimpressive that I had to talk myself into making this video, have saved me, conservatively, over $200,000 in the last decade. Not through grinding harder, not through some arbitrage play nobody told you about, through background processes. Let me explain exactly what I mean by that. The premise of this entire video is that your financial life runs on 2 layers. There's the visible layer, the portfolio, the salary, the investments you actively think about, the decisions you make with full conscious attention, and there's the invisible layer, the behavioral patterns, the automatic spending, the habits running quietly underneath, whether you pay attention or not. Most people spend 100% of their financial attention on the visible layer and 0% on the invisible one. And it is the invisible layer that is quietly, systematically determining your outcome. What I'm going to show you is how to optimize the invisible layer. Not through willpower. Willpower is unreliable, inconsistent, and depletes exactly when you need it most. Through systems that run automatically, generating returns that compound in your favor without requiring your daily participation. Yes, these systems are boring. That's the entire point. Boring works precisely because it doesn't need your attention to keep functioning. By the way, I built a free early retirement calculator because most of the ones online are mathematically wrong. They ignore sequence of returns risk and assume flat market conditions that have literally never existed. Mine uses BlackRock and Vanguard actuarial modeling to expose the actual weak points in your retirement plan. I only ask for your email to send the report. I don't store any of your financial data. Link is in the description. Now here's the central concept I keep coming back to, and I'm going to keep returning to it throughout this video because it explains almost everything. Think about your financial life like a computer operating system. On the surface, you have applications, the stuff you interact with deliberately, your brokerage account, your salary negotiations, the investment decisions you research and make with full attention. That's the foreground. That's what everyone talks about at dinner parties, in finance forums, in every YouTube thumbnail you've ever seen. But underneath the foreground, there are background processes. They run continuously. They consume real system resources every single hour. On a well-managed machine, background processes are lean, efficient, and invisible in the best way. On a neglected machine, which describes most people's financial operating systems, the background processes are bloated, redundant, and quietly consuming so much capacity that the foreground can barely keep up. Your investment returns can be excellent, and your net worth still barely moves, because the background processes are eating everything the visible layer generates. Every habit in this video is a background process. Some of them are leaks draining your system against your interest. Some of them are optimizations, making everything else run more efficiently. The goal is not to monitor them obsessively. The goal is to configure them correctly once, and then let them execute. I think about background processes in 3 categories. And this framework is going to help you understand which habits matter most for your specific situation. Category 1, environmental background processes. These are habits that control your exposure, your grocery routine, your physical and digital environment, your weekly structure. They work by reducing contact with extraction systems before any decision even has a chance to happen. You can't make a bad purchase decision if you're never in the environment that triggers it. Category 2, temporal background processes. These are habits that control when money moves. Automated investing, subscription audits, the purchasing delay rule, I'll explain shortly. They work by inserting time and friction between a financial stimulus and the spending response. Category 3, psychological background processes. These are habits that generate self-knowledge, weekly spending reviews, cost per use thinking, lifestyle inflation tracking. They work by converting your own behavioral patterns into legible, actionable data. You can't fix a pattern you can't see. When all 3 categories are running well, your financial machine operates at a completely different level. When one category is neglected, the other 2 can't compensate. Let's go through the habits. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you a number about subscription spending that will make you physically uncomfortable. But first, let me show you why your grocery store is one of the most sophisticated extraction machines in your everyday life, and how one ruthlessly boring habit neutralizes it entirely. Habit 1, eating the same meal rotation every week. I know, stay with me for 60 seconds. There's research from the Journal of Consumer Research on decision fatigue in grocery environments. It found that shoppers without a fixed list make, on average, 31% more impulse purchases than shoppers with a predetermined one. Not 31% worse nutritional decisions, 31% more unplanned spending. And this isn't because listless shoppers are less disciplined. It's because the grocery store is an engineered behavioral environment. The layout, the product placement, the end cap promotions, the fresh flowers positioned at the entrance to trigger an emotional state of abundance, none of that is accidental. The grocery industry employs behavioral designers whose entire professional purpose is to capture the unstructured browser. Walk in with a fixed list and you exit that target population immediately. Here's the dollar math. The average American household spends approximately $9,000 a year on groceries. Per Bureau of Labor Statistics 2024 consumer expenditure data, a 31% reduction in impulse purchases is $2,790 per year. Invested consistently at 7% annual return for 30 years, that single habit compounds to approximately $284,000. $284,000 from a grocery list. That is a background process running silently in your favor every single week, compounding into a number that most active stock pickers would kill for. The background process is running whether you're watching or not. The question is whether it runs for you or against you. Habit 2, auditing your subscriptions every quarter. Not once, every quarter. A C+R research study found that Americans underestimate their monthly subscription spending by approximately 80%. The average person believes they spend $86 a month on subscriptions. The measured actual average is $219. That is a $133 monthly gap between what you think your background processes are costing and what they are actually costing. $1,596 a year, vanishing, not being spent on anything memorable or meaningful, just disappearing into the background noise of recurring billing. Subscription businesses are architecturally designed to survive your intentions to cancel. This is not an oversight. It is a deliberate product design choice backed by decades of behavioral research and hundreds of millions of dollars of A/B testing. The moment you sign up for a free trial, you are being bet against by a team of UX engineers and retention economists whose sole professional purpose is to make canceling psychologically harder than signing up. They have studied and identified the exact moment of friction at which cancellation intent drops to zero. They built that friction in deliberately at every product touchpoint, in every cancellation flow. You cannot out-willpower a billion-dollar retention algorithm. You are not going to spontaneously remember in 6 months that you're still paying for a meditation app you used twice in February. The system is designed to prevent that from happening. The only effective countermeasure is a scheduled, recurring background process. Every quarter, pull your bank and credit card statements, identify every recurring charge, ask one question about each. Did I deliberately choose to pay for this month, with full awareness that I was doing so? If the answer is anything other than yes, cancel it immediately. No negotiations. No, I'll use it next month. cancel it. $1,500 recovered per year, invested from age 30 to 65 at historical S&P 500 nominal returns of approximately 10%, $500,000. From app subscriptions, from things you're already paying for and mostly not using. The background process is running, whether you're watching or not. Here's the thing. Nobody in personal finance says directly because it sounds insulting. You think the problem is that you don't make enough. The actual problem is that your brain is biologically wired to treat every available dollar as spendable. Income and lifestyle costs scale together by default. Behavioral economists call this the hedonic treadmill, and it is the most documented, most replicated, and least discussed concept in personal finance. A Princeton study on income and emotional well-being found that life satisfaction stops improving meaningfully above roughly $75,000. Adjusted for 2024 inflation, that's around $100,000 household income. Above that threshold, additional income produces very little additional happiness, but produces reliably higher spending. You're not underpaid, you're under-systematized. Habit 3. The 48-hour rule on every non-essential purchase over $50. I want to be precise about the neurochemistry here, because this is the part that permanently reframes how you think about wanting things. When you encounter something you want to buy, your brain releases dopamine at the moment of discovery, not at the moment of purchase, at the moment of discovery. The neurochemical peak is the wanting, not the having. By the time you actually complete the transaction, dopamine is already in decline. This is documented across decades of behavioral economics research, originating in part from Kahneman and Tversky's work on anticipated versus experienced utility, and replicated extensively since. You are structurally receiving more chemical reward from browsing than from owning. The purchase itself is almost always a neurochemical anticlimax. The 48-hour rule exploits this with zero willpower required. You see something, you want it, you write it down, and you wait. The dopamine spike from discovery dissipates naturally over 24 to 48 hours. When you return to the item with a normalized neurochemical baseline, approximately 70% of purchases no longer feel necessary. Not because you exercise discipline, because the biological event that manufactured the desire is already finished. I keep a running list on my phone titled Maybe. Every purchase I'm tempted to make goes onto the list instead of into a cart. I review it weekly. Approximately 22% of items on that list ever become actual purchases. The other 78% die there quietly without any effort on my part. That is 78% of potential impulse spending eliminated by a note app in 48 hours. Average American impulse purchase spending runs between $3,000 and $5,000 annually, according to Slick Deal's survey data from 2023. Apply the 78% reduction and you recover $2,200 to $3,900 per year. Invest it over 20 years at 7% return, somewhere between $90,000 and $160,000, from a list on your phone and a timer. By the way, hit subscribe if you're getting value from this. YouTube's recommendation system is genuinely strange, and without a subscription signal from you, it may simply never show you one of my videos again. I'm not being rhetorical. That's just how content distribution works in 2026. And I find it mildly absurd, but that's the reality. Habit 4, paying yourself first, automatically, before the money ever touches your checking account. Let me tell you about a composite character I'll call Brian, because I've had some version of this conversation with about 30 different people in the last several years. Brian is 41 years old, earns $115,000 a year, has a 401k with a 6% employer match, which is mathematically a guaranteed 100% return on that slice of his contribution. Free money available right now, requiring no market skill whatsoever. He contributes 3%. Why? He says he can't afford more. Brian has a $720 monthly car payment, 3 streaming services he uses with varying frequency, a gym membership he hasn't used since March, but hasn't canceled because canceling feels like admitting defeat. He eats lunch out 3 times a week because office culture makes packing food feel socially awkward. He has a credit card with a balance he's been carrying for 14 months that he intends to pay off but hasn't yet because life is expensive and he works hard and sometimes you need things. None of these decisions is catastrophic in isolation. They are all entirely reasonable choices made by a reasonable person living a reasonable life. They are also the default settings of a financial operating system that was never deliberately configured. Brian's net worth at 41, after 16 years of full-time employment at solidly above average income, is approximately $145,000. His mathematical retirement projection on current trajectory lands him at age 70. He thinks he's doing fine because the 401k balance is growing and growth feels like progress. He is running too many background processes. The mechanism of paying yourself first is structurally simple. Before your paycheck appears in your checking account balance, an automated transfer routes a fixed percentage directly into investment or savings accounts. The money never registers to your brain as available because it never appears where your brain looks for available money. This is not just a convenient setup, it is psychologically decisive, and the research is not subtle about this. Money that appears in a checking account is mentally categorized as spendable within hours of arrival. Money that never appears there, never receives that categorization. Out of sight is neurologically unavailable for spending decisions. According to Vanguard's 2024 How America Saves report, and this is a number I want to sit with for a moment, households with automatic investment enrollment participate at a 91% rate. Households that must actively choose to opt in participate at 28%. Same people, same income levels, same stated desire to save for retirement. The automation delivers 3 times the behavior that willpower does. Not 5% better, 3 times better. That is not a marginal operational improvement. That is a structural difference in outcomes. Brian, had he automated an additional 8% of income at age 32, $9,200 annually, would be projecting retirement at 64 rather than 70, with an additional $1.4 million in his account. 7 years of his life, $1.4 million from one afternoon in a benefits portal configuring an automated transfer. The background process was always available to him. He just never turned it on. Comedic cutaway. Someone in a finance thread last week asked whether to put $300 a month into a self-directed brokerage for individual stock picks or into a low-cost index fund. The thread generated 47 responses. 2 of them mentioned checking expense ratios first. 45 were extremely confident about the stocks. The thread is still going. Now this is where it gets really interesting, because this next section connects a number that most people have seen but never actually computed. And it's going to change what you think your biggest financial problem actually is. Habit 5, never ignoring expense ratios. $200,000 invested. 30-year horizon. 7% gross market return. At 0.03% expense ratio, that's the Vanguard Total Market Index Fund. As of early 2026, your net annualized return is 6.97%. After 30 years, your portfolio is worth approximately $1.52 million. At 1% expense ratio, that's the average actively managed mutual fund in the United States, your net annualized return is 6%. After 30 years, your portfolio is worth approximately $1.15 million. The difference is $370,000. $370,000 that you never saw leave your account. That appeared in no alert, that no one called to tell you about, that compounded silently against your interest for 30 years. According to a 2023 Morningstar study, over 60% of retail investors cannot correctly identify the expense ratio of their primary retirement fund. The number is disclosed by law. It's on the fund page. It's in the prospectus. 60% of people have simply never looked. The background process runs. The fee compounds for decades. 10 minutes. That is how long it takes to look up your current expense ratios and compare them against a low-cost index fund alternative. I have talked about high-impact financial actions for years, and this is consistently the single highest return per hour activity available to most retail investors who aren't already in low-cost index funds. $370,000 of lifetime value, accessible in 10 minutes. The only reason most people haven't done it is because the extraction is invisible. Nobody built a notification for it. The background process runs quietly, and in the absence of your attention, it runs against you. This is where I want to introduce someone I've been mentioning to people in my network for about 3 years. I'll call him Marcus. Marcus is 44. He did everything right on the surface level. Maxed his 401k. Picked index funds with reasonable allocations. Dollar cost average through the 2020 market downturn without flinching. He executed the boring strategy essentially correctly on the investment selection side. And every time I looked at his numbers, his liquid net worth wasn't moving the way the math said it should. The portfolio was growing, but the overall picture wasn't tracking. I'm going to come back to Marcus in a few minutes because the answer to his situation lives in the next 2 habits. And I think his story is going to land differently once you see those habits clearly. Habit 6, not inflating your lifestyle when your income increases. Parkinson's law applied to personal finance. Expenses rise to meet available income. This is not a character flaw. It is the default behavior of a human brain that normalizes any given standard of living within approximately 6 to 12 weeks of any change. Behavioral economists call this hedonic adaptation. It has been replicated across enough populations, cultures, and income levels to be treated as a near law of human psychology rather than a finding. Here's what lifestyle inflation looks like in real time, because it never feels like a financial mistake when it's happening. You get a raise, you lease a nicer car, you've genuinely earned it. You upgrade your apartment, you do deserve it. You start eating at better restaurants more often, you can legitimately afford it now. You take an international vacation instead of a domestic one, you're doing well. Every individual decision is not only defensible, it's true. You did earn it. You do deserve nice things. But the aggregate result is that your expenses precisely track your income. Your savings rate stays flat as a percentage, and the gap between what you earn and what you build never widens, regardless of how much more you make. Marcus was earning $200,000 a year. His savings rate was approximately the same percentage it had been at $80,000. His lifestyle had expanded precisely and completely to absorb every dollar of increased income. The 401k was growing, genuinely growing, but the liquid, non-retirement account surplus was functionally flat year over year. The background process of lifestyle inflation was consuming the delta silently every month. When I overlaid his income growth and expense growth on the same chart over 5 years, the 2 lines were essentially parallel. He looked at it for a while. Then he said, "I didn't think any of this was the problem." That's always the sentence. It's never, "I knew this was happening and made peace with it." It's, "I didn't think this was the problem," because lifestyle inflation doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like success. It looks like success. That is the entire mechanism by which it operates. It's invisible because it's disguised as a reward. The habit is mechanical. Every time your income increases, the same week you increase your automated investment contribution by at least 60% of the raise amount. The remaining 40% becomes lifestyle upgrade, intentionally allocated. The critical move is installing the automation before you experience the income increase. If the new money hits your checking account before you redirect it, lifestyle inflation will absorb it within 60 days. The background process is faster than your good intentions, every time. Habit 7, having a boring, predictable weekly routine. I want to be precise about what this means financially, because have a routine is advice so generic, it's essentially useless. Here's the specific claim. Your financial exposure is directly proportional to the number of unstructured hours you spend in environments engineered to extract money from you. Shopping platforms, delivery apps, social media algorithms, online retail recommendation engines. These are not neutral environments. They are extraction machines, architecturally optimized with hundreds of millions of dollars of behavioral research and real-time personalization algorithms, with one singular purpose: to create a desire that didn't exist 30 seconds ago and convert it to a purchase before the dopamine dissipates. They are excellent at this. They are better at it every year. A structured routine reduces your exposure by replacing unstructured time with predetermined activity. When you know what you're doing, Monday through Sunday, gym, meal prep, specific work blocks, pre-allocated leisure, planned errands you are operating in a system you designed, not in an extraction machine someone else designed. And the system you designed, by default, is not trying to sell you anything. Roy Baumeister's research on decision fatigue, replicated across multiple experimental contexts, showed that the quality of decisions declines measurably after a certain number of decisions are made across a day. A boring routine eliminates decision opportunities. Fewer decisions means fewer moments when the extraction machine catches you in a neurologically depleted state, which is statistically your most financially vulnerable state. This is where Marcus's situation becomes fully legible. Marcus had an excellent investment routine, contributions automated, allocations sensible, review process disciplined. But his lifestyle routine had gaps large enough to drive several expensive background processes through them. He didn't meal plan because his income level made it feel unnecessary. He didn't track restaurant spending because each individual expense seemed minor relative to his earnings. He didn't have a specific entertainment budget because the line items felt small in isolation. Together, these unstructured windows were consuming somewhere between $2,000 and $3,500 a month in spending that generated no compounding, no equity, and no lasting satisfaction. He wasn't making bad decisions. He was making decisions in unstructured windows, and in unstructured windows, the extraction machines win by default. Habit 8, cost per use thinking instead of sticker price thinking. A $300 winter coat worn 200 times costs $1.50 per use. A $40 coat worn 4 times costs $10 per use. The $40 coat is 6.67 times more expensive on the only metric that actually determines financial impact. This framework, applied consistently, restructures your entire relationship with spending decisions. The question is never, how much does this cost? It's how much does each use of this cost? And how many times will the realistic version of me actually use it? That second half is where the genuine discipline lives, not in the math, which is simple, but in the honest distinction between the fantasy version of yourself and the operational one. The fantasy version of you cooks elaborate meals 5 nights a week, uses the professional-grade kitchen equipment twice a day, reads every book in the bundle, uses the premium gym membership 6 mornings a week. The operational version comes home on Tuesday, tired, and makes pasta. These are different people, and the operational version should be the one making the purchase decision. I buy less, but meaningfully better in a short list of categories where quality genuinely produces higher use frequency. In every other category, I buy boring and functional, no branding premium, no aspirational markup, background process running efficiently. Habit 9, a 10-minute weekly spending review every Sunday, not monthly, not quarterly. Weekly specifically because the gap between the spending decision and the reflection needs to be short enough to preserve the emotional context of why the purchase happened. At a month's remove, a transaction is just a number. You can't learn from a number. At 6 days remove, you can still remember that you bought that thing because you were avoiding a difficult work task and needed a dopamine hit at 2 p.m. on a Thursday, and that specific understanding is worth 100 generic budgeting frameworks. That's the behavioral data that changes behavior. I've been running this process for over 6 years. What I've developed is a detailed, specific map of my own spending psychology. The times of day when I'm most vulnerable to unplanned purchases. The emotional states that reliably precede spending outside my plan. The categories where I consistently overestimate future use and underestimate current alternatives. Not from reading behavioral finance textbooks, though I've read them, but from looking at my own actual transaction data with enough regularity to see the patterns emerge. Most financial mistakes are not math problems. They are brain problems. You cannot fix a brain problem without accurate, specific, personally calibrated data about when and how it occurs. The weekly review is the data collection mechanism. Everything else, the automation, the rules, the habits, is the repair work. You need the data before the repair can be targeted. Habit 10, driving a boring car, or whatever your version of the boring car is. I want to be precise about this because I'm not making a broad anti-consumption argument. I'm making a specific claim about the category of financial decisions that carry the highest social signaling component, because that category has a reliable, measurable overconsumption premium built directly into its pricing, and that premium is almost always financed. Cars, watches, apartment upgrades beyond functional comfort, restaurants chosen for visibility, clothing, brand premiums. These are categories where you frequently pay a social signaling fee on top of the functional cost, and where that fee is routinely covered by debt or reduced investing rather than by genuine discretionary surplus. The average new car payment in early 2026 is approximately $735 per month per Experian data. That is $8,820 per year on an asset that depreciates an average of 20% in its first year and roughly 50% over 5 years. The average American will own approximately 9 vehicles in their lifetime, financing most of them. Here is the 30-year opportunity cost calculation. $735 per month redirected from a car payment into a low-cost index fund at 7% annual return for 30 years grows to approximately $900,000. Not $900,000 total, $900,000 in addition to whatever base investing was already happening. From one vehicle decision, sustained over a lifetime of purchases, the potential swing in net worth is extraordinary by any reasonable measure. I drive a paid-off car. It's not impressive. Nobody at a stoplight experiences any feelings about it. It transports me from one place to another without extracting $8,800 a year from my investment accounts to fund the monthly cost of appearing successful in traffic. The background process runs quietly. The compounding happens in accounts nobody can see. That is fine with me. Let me give you the concrete numbers in one place, because I think the aggregate effect doesn't fully register until you see it modeled. 32 years old, earns $95,000 a year in a mid-tier US city, currently saving about 8% of gross income into a 401k with a 3% employer match. Liquid net worth today, $40,000. No exotic circumstances. This is someone who exists. Grocery list discipline and reduced impulse food spending, $2,400 per year redirected to investments. Quarterly subscription audit, $1,800 per year recovered. 48-hour rule, eliminating approximately 78% of impulse purchase intent. Approximately $2,100 per year not spent. Automated additional investing of 7% of gross on top of existing contributions before it touches checking. $6,650 additional per year. Expense ratio optimization from an industry average of around 1.1% to 0.05% on all contributions, roughly $300,000 in additional compounding over 30 years, modeled on a portfolio starting at $40,000. No lifestyle inflation on a projected 15% income increase over the next decade, approximately $9,000 per year of additional savings capacity preserved rather than absorbed. Vehicle decision, driving a paid-off car for 4 extra years instead of financing a replacement, $8,400 per year, not flowing to a lender. Total additional annual investment capacity redirected through these habits, approximately $28,000 per year. Plus the compounding benefit of fee optimization, which operates on the full portfolio rather than just the new contributions. 30-year projection on the additional $28,000 per year at 7%, approximately $2.8 million. Total projected retirement portfolio at 62, starting from that $40,000 liquid base. With fee optimization and consistent contributions, somewhere in the range of $3.2 to $3.4 million, depending on market sequence. Trajectory without these habits, between $850,000 and $1.1 million. The difference, roughly $2.2 to $2.5 million, from 10 boring habits, 0 additional income required, no investment sophistication required beyond selecting low-cost index funds. No sacrifice that registers as sacrifice more than 6 weeks after it begins. Marcus, who I've been mentioning throughout this video, ultimately changed 3 of these 10 habits. Not all 10, 3. He bought a functional car when his lease expired instead of upgrading. He ran the quarterly subscription audit for the first time in his adult life. He increased his automated investment contribution by 6% of income and never allowed it to reverse when lifestyle spending pressure felt high. His net worth moved more in the following 18 months than in the preceding 4 years combined. He texted me, "I feel like I had a leak I couldn't see." He had several. Most people do. Not because they're making dramatic errors, because the background processes were running unchecked, quietly in the background, exactly as designed. 3 practical takeaways, specific ones, calibrated exactly to what we covered. 1. This week, export 3 months of bank and credit card statements and run a search for any charge appearing more than twice. Every recurring line item, without exception. Cancel every subscription you did not actively, consciously choose to pay this specific month with full awareness that you were doing so. Don't negotiate with yourself. Don't give it one more month. Cancel it. If you genuinely miss it, within 60 days, you can resubscribe intentionally. The difference between that and the current situation is intentionality. And intentionality is worth approximately $500,000 over a working career. 2, this week, not this quarter, this week, set up one automated transfer from your paycheck or checking account into a dedicated investment or savings account. Even if the initial amount is $150 per month, the amount matters less right now than the architecture. You are installing a background process, not maximizing a contribution. Get the transfer running this week. Increase it on a fixed schedule. The automation is doing the work that willpower statistically cannot. 3, before your next non-essential purchase over $100, write it on a list and set a 48-hour timer. Do not add it to a cart. Do not save it for later. Do not screenshot it. Write it on paper or in a note app and wait. Review it in 48 hours. Apply the cost per use calculation to anything that still feels worth purchasing. What survives that process is something you actually want. What doesn't survive is a dopamine event you mistook for a preference. Those 3 actions, started this week, begin installing the environmental and temporal background processes. The psychological ones, the weekly review, the cost per use framework, the lifestyle inflation tracking develop over months. But the 3 above generate immediate, measurable changes in your financial trajectory without requiring any new information, any investment knowledge, or any income increase. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. And the final observation, which I genuinely find amusing in a way that I can't quite explain, the entire financial media complex, the newsletters, the stock picks, the options flow alerts, the leverage tutorials, the hot sector rotations exists because complexity is what sells subscriptions and advisory fees and trading platforms. Not because complexity produces better outcomes. The evidence from Vanguard, Fidelity, Morningstar, and 30 years of academic finance research consistently and repeatedly shows that low cost, low activity, boring strategies outperform active management in the majority of cases over long time horizons. The complexity exists to justify the fee structure. The fee structure exists to extract the $370,000 from your 30-year return. The boring strategy was always available. It was never the interesting option. That's the joke.